Everyone, we are live in our election night pre-show. I'm, of course, your host, Roman Balmakov from the Epoch Times, also the host of Facts Matter. And tonight is the night. Tonight is the exciting night where we're finally going to stop receiving all the mailers. We're finally going to have to, well, not have to, the opposite, stop seeing all the TV ads for the different candidates, the radio ads, the billboards. Finally, those will go away and we'll know the truth. We'll know which narrative ultimately is the underlying reality of this country. Will Harris be the president for the next 4 years, or will Trump pull off essentially a Grover Cleveland and serve 2 non-consecutive terms for the second time in American history? Very, very interesting night. But before we dive into a lot of the specifics that I want to talk about, which are very, very spicy in my opinion, I just want to mention something, which is that maybe because it's my profession, which is like news, I have to be in the news. I'm always reading the news. And then if there's a story that sort of catches my interest, me and my team go deeper into that story. So we kind of like go deeper into the news. So my whole life is kind of like news. And I realized recently that because of that, I've developed a very sort of black-pilled worldview where I really thought that because there's so much perceived division in this country, that there might really be some kind of like dark times ahead, right? Like, oh man, whether Trump wins or Harris wins, there might like be some actual tumultuous times ahead. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But recently what happened was that last Thursday, I bought a pair of really, really good shoes, really good walking shoes. So these shoes, by the way, they're not sponsoring me or anything. These shoes are so good. They're the On Clouds. Here, they're super comfortable. They're the most comfortable shoes I've ever had for walking. And the reason I bring it up is because since Thursday, I've been walking around New York City nonstop because of the shoes. They're just so comfortable. And so I've been averaging like 7 to 13 miles per day walking, pretty much every single day. And I've been walking through different neighborhoods, like residential neighborhoods, business districts, different types of business districts, like the garment district, the rug district. I walked through like Hasidic neighborhoods. And what I've learned, well, I guess the real takeaway I got from walking around everywhere was that people are actually fine. Like, I feel like all this division is largely on social media, right? Like on our phones, like we get essentially the worst highlights from around the world delivered to us all the time, right? Like the riots, the fights, the arguments, all that stuff. But those are like the highlights from around the world. If you actually just like stop and look at your own neighborhood, it's actually not that bad. Like, people hang out with their neighbors, they hang out with their family. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I thought that if the electricity went out, that we would have some kind of like civil war situation where like one side would be fighting the other like right away. But actually, I think I came to the realization that if the electricity went out, it would be much better because all the division is largely on mainstream media and social media. But once you take that variable away, people will just be like, wow, actually, it's not that bad. Like I love my neighbors, I love my family, and people will actually be very cohesive. So my point is, I'm no longer black-pilled. I'm very white-pilled. I'm very optimistic for the future. And I think no matter who wins the election, there's a lot of positive things coming no matter what, right? Positive vibes, a lot of optimism, and the future, in my opinion, looks bright. So let's take that energy with us moving forward. Okay, so before the polls close, they're going to be closing soon, but we already have a lot of early voting data. So right now, if you look at this year compared to 2020, which is the last, I guess, comp year we can use, 75 million people this year have already cast early ballots. So 75 million people have already cast ballots. And when you look at that state by state and you compare that to 2020, that is, I mean, the numbers are insane. Like if you look at Texas, for instance, as of this morning. So you don't count all the people who already voted today on election day, but just coming into today. In Texas, it was like 80% compared to 2020 have already voted early voting. Arizona, it's like 60%. New Mexico, it's like 75. Connecticut, it's 50%. North Carolina is wild. It's like, it looks like 80%. Tennessee is 70%. Nevada is 80%. Vermont, 60%. So a ton of states have already voted early. Michigan is like over 50%. Wisconsin is about 50%. Washington is over 50%. So the rules really did change after 2020. I mean, if you remember, prior to 2020, early voting was a very small phenomenon. It was isolated to just a few states, and it was largely for people who were like couldn't make it to the ballot box, or for people in the military. But largely it was a pretty small phenomena. But like 2020, then you had the midterms in 2022, where you kind of saw, I mean, of course, midterms usually have less of a turnout in general, but it was, you could compare the 2022 midterms to the 2018 midterms, and already there was a significant shift in turnout. But then like this year is wild. Without even looking at the election day numbers, you already had 75 million people voting early. That is absolutely wild. Actually here, the specific number is that before the actual election day, 60% of eligible voters already voted prior to election day, which is 60%, which is 2/3 of the eligible voters who voted in 2020. That's crazy. 2/3 of the eligible voters from the year 2020 have already voted in this year's election, which is 60% of eligible voters in total. I mean, that's wild. I wonder what that actually means moving forward for elections in general. I mean, it seems like unless there's some kind of a big shift back to on the day, election day voting, it seems like this kind of trend will definitely continue. I mean, just like if you look at the graph from 2020 to 2014, it's a pretty obvious trend that we're moving towards early mail-in ballot voting, early vote. Well, I guess just they didn't split it up here, but I guess early voting in general, like prior to the actual ballot day. And I forgot to actually mention at the top of the episode, today's episode, it's not sponsored, but it is dedicated to the memory of Peanut the Squirrel. Peanut the Squirrel, if you've been following that story, that is wild. He went from essentially a pet squirrel who was saved by a guy in New York who raised him, who's been taking care of him, who essentially also built him up into like a social media personality of his own. Like the squirrel was a social media personality with over 1 million followers. And then New York State authorities came in, raided this guy's home for 5 hours, caught the squirrel, and euthanized the squirrel because they claimed that he was unlawfully harboring wildlife. So, I mean, if that's what they had to do, that's what they had to do. But essentially, this squirrel has turned into a symbol of government overreach, a government that is so powerful that they have enough resources and time on their hands to plan and execute a search warrant on a squirrel for 5 hours and then go ahead and euthanize the squirrel. It's true. My producer is looking at me like, oh, that's not election related. It completely is election related. It's it happened right before the election, and it's on the top of people's minds. So I couldn't think of anything more election related than that. Okay, so we discussed the fact that coming into the election, you already had 60% of eligible voters cast their ballots before election day. However, what's interesting is that not only have the rules for early voting changed, but the rules in terms of counting have changed as well since the year 2020. And I mean, I'm sure you've noticed it too. Coming into this election, a lot of panelists on TV and a lot of editorials on news media, they've sort of made a point to emphasize that we won't know the election results, the true election results, until several days after today, until several days after election day, especially if you have really thin margins. And I mean, that's exactly what we saw in 2022, right? Like we knew, well, actually we didn't know, right? It was, come to think of it, it was like, who's gonna be the majority party in the House was like up for debate 5 days into the election. Like people assumed it would be the Republicans, just because they had that kind of like padding majority. But over the course of 5 days, I believe like they had 10 seats that the Republicans were supposed to take, but they only wound up taking like 4 or 5, if I remember correctly. So depending on how close this race gets, we might actually not know who's going to be in the White House for maybe upwards of 10 days. We had our researchers here at the Epoch Times. They went through the different battleground states, and they sort of took a look at a few data points for each battleground state, and they mapped out how long we should expect for each battleground state to count 100% of their ballots. So here's a few questions that we were asking each battleground state. For instance, we'll start with Arizona. Here's the few questions. When do they begin counting in-person early voting? So in-person early voting, when do those ballots start to get counted? Like in some states, they are just counted on a rolling basis. In other states, they begin to get counted on election day. And in other states, all ballots, no matter how they came in, only start to get counted after all polls are closed, right? So essentially, there's like three big ways that states count their ballots. So that's the first question. The second question we were asking is, when will they process the mail-in ballots? So again, some states process the mail-in ballots upon receipt. Others process them with the rest of the ballots after the polls close or when election day comes, which is today. And then the last question is, when will they count the mail-in absentee ballots? Same thing. And then the other question is, up until when do they accept mail-in ballots? So some states, they accept mail-in ballots like on election day. Others, as long as you postmarked it on election day, they'll accept it. So they might accept it like a week out. So we were asking these questions to the battleground states, and also we took into consideration like how many poll workers they have, whether they're doing signature verification or not, like all those type of things. And then we kind of put it together. We were able to put together an estimate of how soon we can expect to see results. So here's what we found: Arizona, we can expect at the absolute latest to have 100% of their data in 20 days from election day. And the reason that'll take so long is largely because of Maricopa County, who said that they're estimating that it'll take between 10 to 12 days to finish counting all the ballots for the November election. So just for that county, it'll take 10 to 12 days to finish counting all the ballots for the November election. Plus, you take into account a few other factors, and we estimated 20 days. But I mean, realistically, it'll take like 12 days. So that's still like a week and a half for Arizona as an estimate for when we'll know all their ballots. Georgia, 3 to 7 days. So Georgia, we can expect upwards of a week for them to be 100% counted. Michigan, upwards of 6 days. So Michigan is also close to a week for when we can expect to see the final results there. Nevada, 3 to 7 days. So Nevada is also about half a week to a full week to see their election results. North Carolina, 1 to 10 days. That's a fairly large spread, and it's a fairly large spread. So North Carolina can expect to see 100% of all ballots counted by 10 days. Pennsylvania is 10 to 12 days. Pennsylvania is one of those unique states where it will really take a while for Pennsylvania to come up with their final answers, and that's because they begin counting once the polls are closed. Only once polls are closed, then they will begin counting the actual day of election results. However, the mail-in ballots, they've already started to count at 7 a.m. today. So basically, the mail-in ballots and early ballots, they began counting on election day, so they were not counting them on a rolling basis. And then the actual in-person voting, they'll begin counting when polls are closed. And then Wisconsin is upwards of 6 days, so upwards of a week for Wisconsin. So that's what we can expect to see. So if you're hoping to get like finalized election results tonight, well, you might not be in luck. Well, personally, I'm going to have to be awake up until 3 a.m. We're going to be over on NTD doing a live broadcast like as the results come in. But even though we're going to be up until 3 a.m., I have a very strong feeling that we are not going to see the results, the final results today. And actually, what's funny is that some of these battleground states, at least according to the polling data, as well as I guess what took place in the year 2020, the margins are so razor thin that you might think, well, we don't need to know 100% of the result. I'm sure we'll be able to estimate it by 80% in. But it's like, maybe not. Like if the margin is like, 5,000, 10,000, even 15,000 votes, when you're looking at a huge statewide election, like in Pennsylvania as an example, like it really might come down to the wire. Like it might be like 98% of the results in, and it might still like matter what those remaining votes are. So, I guess that's how the rules have kind of shaped up. So, tons of people are voting early and expect to wait upwards of a week to know the final result. So that's That's sort of the world we live in. And again, like whether the election of 2026 and 2028 will move further in this direction or not, well, that depends to be seen. I mean, honestly, if I was to, I'm not a betting man, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that it is moving more so in that direction, because even the more conservative states that have like a conservative legislature, they have like like basically what happened after the year 2020, there was like a shift and two unique tracks. Like one track was that states, sort of more blue states, they opened up mail-in balloting like for everyone. Like some states don't even do in-person voting; it's all mail-in, and they just automatically mail-in ballots for any and all eligible voters. They just they opened up what are they called? Photo ID laws. So one good example is California, where if you have a local municipality in California require ID, that is now illegal. So they're moving in that direction, like completely outlawing the stuff. Other states, like Georgia, they're moving in the opposite direction, where they actually are sort of tightening the election laws. They're making it a little bit harder to vote. They're making, well, not harder, but like, I guess harder is the correct term, but like they're making it more strict. Like you have to have a voter, just a government issued ID to vote. There's very strict, more strict parameters on absentee ballots, things like that. So you're moving in these two tracks, but it seems like realistically we're heading towards more in this direction, where in 4 years from now, I imagine we're going to see more mail-in ballots, and probably, unless something changes, we're going to see like a week and a half until we know the election results. That's not what I endorse, but that's the direction we appear to be moving in. So, do you think the Republicans will be taking back the Senate this year? So that's a really interesting question. I actually pulled up an analysis before we went live. So if I was to guess, honestly, I would say that yes, because right now, heading into the election, the Republicans hold 49 Senate seats, and then the Democrats, sort of like / independents that caucus with the Democrats, they have the majority. But there are enough senators who are up for re-election that I think would actually be enough to flip. For instance, Montana is almost a surefire Republican pickup. Where is it? Let me just pull it up. Oh yeah, so here. So Montana, you had John Tester. So John Tester is kind of this unique situation. Montana, deep red state, but he sort of worked his way up the ranks, and he is like, I think, of one of only 2 Democrats to hold statewide office in Montana. He's a Democrat senator who's up for re-election right now. But so the last time he was elected was 2018, if he's up for re-election this year. And the political winds have changed so much that the Republican in that race is +7, at least according to polling data. So, I mean, +7 is pretty much like, especially in Montana, so you don't have that like quiet Trump vote. So, I mean, barring any really unforeseen circumstances, the incumbent Democrat senator in Montana will, in my opinion, 99% flip to Tim Sheehy. He's a Republican, and so Montana will be a pickup for Republicans. And then the only other sort of relevant incumbent, so for instance, Nevada, there's an incumbent, Democrat incumbent, 5.3%. That's probably not going to shift. Texas, you have Ted Cruz. He's up 4 points, and it's Texas. So I know there's a lot of like right now, media coverage on, will Texas flip blue? I kind of doubted it in this election. I don't believe it's tight enough for that to happen for Texas. I mean, Texas is like trending towards purple, but that might be the case where there's like really a tight race in 2028. Not, in my opinion, not this year. Arizona, Kari Lake is trailing hard, like 6 points behind. You never know, but she did lose the gubernatorial race there, so that's probably not a pickup. Wisconsin, Democrat incumbent, has a strong chance of holding that seat. Here's where things, in my opinion, get interesting. So Montana, Republicans pick up that seat, 99% chance. Right away, you have a tie situation in the Senate, because then Republicans will have 50 seats, right? In that, of course, situation, if you have 50-50, whoever is in the White House is that cast that tie-breaking vote through the vice presidency, right? However, you have the unique situation of Ohio. So Ohio is a very red state. I mean, they are voting for Trump by margins of like 6%, right? In fact, prior to here, I made some screenshots for myself because I know we'd be talking about it. So In the 2020 election, Trump won the vote by, like 53 to 45. So what is that? That's like close to 8% Trump. So Ohio, I mean, it's deeply red. And prior to that, in 2016, Trump won over Hillary in Ohio by, by upwards of like 8%. So it's actually pretty steady. So between then, though, Sherrod Brown. So Sherrod Brown is also kind of a unique situation. He's a Democrat incumbent in Ohio, which is a very red state. Sherrod Brown, though, he has a lot of name recognition. He has a lot of like deep connections with the Ohio electorate. He's been the incumbent for like a very, very long time. Even when I think when I lived in Ohio, which was like 15 years ago, I think he was the incumbent then, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe if not in the Senate and some other office. However, he's up for re-election now, and he's, according to the polls, he's up 2. But just with the way the political winds have been sort of shaping up, like let's see, in 2018 he won by 6 points. Sherrod Brown won by 6 points. But from that time, you've had the 2016 election where Trump beat Hillary. The 2018 election was a bit of a referendum on Trump, right? In a certain sense. Then the 2020 election where Trump increased his margin in Ohio and really secure that state as like a super red stronghold. And now, I mean, Trump is of course polling to win. J.D. Vance is his running mate. He's the senator from Ohio. So I can really imagine that Sherrod Brown could be defeated in Ohio. I mean, you do have the abortion angle there, like they did in Ohio last year, pass a abortion constitutional amendment, but that's already done. So I can't imagine that like the abortion vote would sway enough Democrats to like come out in droves for the Senate, enough to actually flip it. So I suspect that Sherrod Brown has a good chance of losing, and Bernie Moreno could actually flip that seat as well. If that happens, then the Senate would go handedly to the Republicans. If that doesn't happen, it will be a 50-50 split, and then whoever wins the White House would then essentially take control of the Senate as well. So it could be either Harris or Trump. So that's sort of my analysis. Like, I think personally that the Republicans can almost certainly tie the Senate, and then it'll just be determined by whoever wins the presidency. That's my guess. If Ohio goes red, then the Republicans definitely take the Senate, and then if the Republicans also take the White House, then it would be just like up to, essentially. So that is my answer there. Then let's move on to something I prepared, which I think is actually quite interesting, because I know everyone tonight is focused like, who's going to win the White House, who's going to win the Senate, who's going to win the House. But there's actually something quite interesting happening at the local level. And, local races are kind of a mixed bag because, like, obviously, in terms of the media, they get a lot less coverage. Like, who wins the White House, who wins the Senate, who wins the House. That's like, it basically takes all the oxygen out of the media environment. But if you really think about it, like, who controls the local state legislature, that is more important in your own life. Like, you brush up against like local state laws and like local ordinances a lot more than you do with federal level laws. Like, of course, federal laws can affect you, especially like as an example, I live in New York City, and there's noticeably more migrants here. Like, even in the neighborhood where I live, it's like the park has a lot more migrants camping out there. Like, it's very noticeable. So obviously, federal levels, positions affect our local day-to-day lives, I guess more so now than before. But still, like on things like abortion, education, I wrote them down, education, healthcare, taxes. Taxes is a good one, like whether you pay higher or lower state level tax, what the gasoline tax in your state is, whether you pay tax on hot food versus prepared food, what the sales tax is, what the real estate tax is, what the estate tax. All that is like at the local level. Marijuana, transportation. Basically, the local level laws and ordinances affect people very viscerally on a day-to-day basis. And so along that line, I hope my producer can put up a graphic up on screen that's tied to a really good analysis that we did at the Epoch Times, where it shows sort of like the super majorities across the nation. And what you're seeing on that map, so the map, it's really interesting. So there's 4 colors on the map. So the deep red, like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, those are the states where the Republicans have a supermajority in the state legislature. And what that means is that the state legislature is essentially under one-party control. So in those cases, in the deep red cases, states that you see up on your screen, that's where the Republicans, they can do basically anything they want. And even if the governor is a Democrat, they have enough votes to override that veto. And also, if there's a filibuster in the Senate, they have enough of a I guess plurality or majority. I guess either one. They have enough of a majority to override a filibuster. And so in the deep red states, it's essentially one party control for Republicans. On that same map, in the deep blue, for instance, like states like California, Hawaii, Illinois, New York, Maryland, and Massachusetts, those are the exact opposite, where you have the Democrats holding a supermajority in that state legislature. So, for instance, in California and Illinois, the Democrats, they can push forward any agenda, they can push forward like any policies that they want, and the Republicans are sort of like, they have their hands tied. They can't do anything in those states. So that's sort of the situation that we have going into this election. So on that same map, though, you can see that there's 6 states that are lightly colored. So those are Nevada, Colorado, Iowa, Mississippi, South Carolina, as well as Connecticut. So those are states that have a majority in those respective state legislatures, but they don't have a supermajority. And so that is, in my opinion, like a very interesting metric going into this election. How will that actually shape up? For instance, like Iowa, if you look at that map, it's kind of like light red. Will Iowa be able to become a supermajority moving forward? Like in this election, like essentially after November 5th, will Iowa join the supermajority club and have like a Republican supermajority? Or will Colorado have a Democrat supermajority? It would be very interesting to see because it very much shows like a polarity in our elections where red states are voting more and more red and they're becoming like a sort of like a one-party state, and blue states are voting more and more blue and they're becoming a more like a one-party blue. So it's very interesting. And this trend is really, I believe, started, like it really began to like become noticeable in the year 2010. That was when you had 2 sort of competing organizations. I forgot what they were called. It was in this article. They're called, basically it was like one something Democrat organization and one something Republican organization. And they just began, here it is. So the 2 organizations were called the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, or the DLCC. And then on the other side, you had the Republican State Leadership Committee, or the RSLC. And they just began to dump money into local races to essentially shape it in this fashion, right? Prior to 2010, you didn't really have as much national focus on these local races from what I remember and from what I've read. But after this change, you really did have this sort of like slow moving polarity in 2 separate directions, which is now culminated into this. Like this is actually pretty wild. And from the research I've done, this is the most supermajorities that we've had, I believe, in American history, where you've had states like completely bifurcated like this. And this is the most amount of states that have had this. And depending on how this election shapes up, you might have 6 states join the supermajority club. Very, very interesting. And it really does have an effect because, take the state of Mississippi as an example. Mississippi's governor is Tate Reeves. I've interviewed him, very interesting man, and he has a very pro-life agenda. Like his agenda is very, very pro-life. So it would be interesting to see if Mississippi joins this like supermajority club, whether he would be able to push forward like a more pro-life agenda that would have otherwise been hampered by the Democrats in the state. Because I'm sure right now, if he wants to push forward like something as far as like let's say an abortion ban or something like a 6-week ban or something like that, he wouldn't be able to because of the Democrats in the state legislature. But if Mississippi were able to achieve like a supermajority, would he be able to push that forward. It would be interesting to see. Again, I'm not advocating for one or the other, but it's just an example of what it means when you have a one-party rule supermajority. And like, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Like that's another question that I would have. Like, is it a good thing or a bad thing when you live in a state that's one-party control? Because on the one hand, like, obviously that's like one-party rule that's like synonymous with something that's not good, and there's not as much compromise. And then it sort of really does limit like the kind of ideas that you can talk about, because if it's one-party rule, then the real election just happens in that party's primary. Like New York is a great example. New York is already a supermajority, and so there's really no election in New York. Like whoever wins the Democrat primary just wins the election, right? So the Democrat primary is the election. And so that's so I guess you can compete on that level. Like you can enter as a Democrat in the primary to try to get elected, but that sort of narrows down your available positions, because they have to sort of like, even if you're like very progressive, or if you're like a sort of more moderate Democrat, you still have to sort of be within the Democrat parameters to even, potentially win that primary. So it sort of like limits what a state could possibly do. And so that's, I guess, the bad of having a one-party supermajority. But on the other hand, it was voted in by a democratic process. So that is what the people actually in these states wanted. So it's like, I guess you can decide, leave your thoughts in the comments. Like, is it good or bad that a state has this kind of supermajority state legislature? Like, I'd love to know your thoughts, actually, because I can kind of see both parts of it, where like, conservatives just want to live in a really conservative state, and progressives really want to live in a progressive state. And, the people who happen to be progressive in Montana, they might not appreciate that, but that's sort of, that's sort of the reality that they live in. So yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts. Leave them in the comment section below. One other thing that I've been focusing on heading into this election on a local level are ballot initiatives. So ballot initiatives, in my opinion, they're like a really interesting aspect of the national election. Like the election that happens every 4 years, like not the midterms, but the presidential, 2020, 2024, 2028, that election. Because ballot initiatives, they have a unique quality where they can really sort of tangentially influence who wins the White House. Let me explain how. And I had our team prepare for us the ballot initiatives and the ballot referendums across the country in the battleground states. And so we put them into 6 different categories, like gay rights, labor rights, crime-related and like law and order, marijuana, abortion. That's 5. There was a 6th one. I guess I didn't print it out. But anyway, there's 6 different categories of ballot initiatives. And these are initiatives that are either looking to change the state constitution or to pass a law that's sort of people are directly voting on. Like, so basically, like when you go into the ballot box and you're picking, the choices that are presented before you, you might pick like, on the ballot, you might have like for president, who you want. Then for your local House race, I want this guy. You might have some judge options. You might have some like a state attorney, attorney general, etc. And then you have some other questions like, question 3, blah, 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 like yes or no, or proposition 8, blah, blah. So those are like the questions that voters are going to be asked. So this is the perfect example of what I mean by these having the potential to shape the national election. So this right here are the abortion-related ballot referendums. And I'll highlight for you the ones, for like Arizona is the perfect example. So Arizona has on the ballot something known as Proposition 139. And it enshrines abortion until fetal viability or to protect the health of the mother. So it basically enshrines abortion as a right in the state of Arizona until either fetal viability or up until any point to protect the health of the mother. So the reason this matters, the reason that this ballot initiative matters. Now, I mean, of course, let's just say to the people living in that state, it matters like on a visceral level, like it affects their lives. But for the national conversation, the reason it matters is because having a ballot initiative like that in a certain election, it will naturally drive more people to the ballot box for whom this issue is very important. So if somebody really feels strongly about Proposition 139, which enshrines abortion as a right, whether they feel strongly for it or feel strongly against it, they'll naturally want to come to the ballot box. And then once they're in the ballot box, well, why not vote for, Harris, or why not vote for Trump, right? Based on what the ballot initiative is. And so that's why ballot initiatives are so critical. And by the way, I'm not just like saying this as like a kind of an interesting aside. Political operatives know this. Like the people who are in these campaigns running election, or in either in the campaigns or in the broader, like let's say DCCC, the Democrat, let's say National Committee, or like the Republican National Committee, they know that if they can get a ballot initiative at the same time that they have a federal election, that will naturally drive more ideologically aligned people. So, for instance, I mean, the abortion is obviously one that will drive people who are pro-abortion to enshrine abortion as a right? And that seems to be the trend across the country. Like even very conservative states, like Ohio is a good example. Super conservative state, they made abortion. They codified abortion into law as a referendum last year, right? So it's like, it seems to cut no matter what. So it seems to really, like, the abortion issue drives a lot more people to the ballot box who are pro-abortion. I'm sure it drives people who are anti-abortion as well, but it seems for that position, it'll drive more people who are pro-abortion to the ballot box. And then those people, if you did a polling of them, they seem to lean more towards Harris. And so it would be interesting to see how this would affect. Like if you have two identical elections in Arizona, one where you don't have Proposition 139 on the ballot and one where you do, what's the change in votes? How many more votes does Harris pick up because of this ballot initiative, right? So something actually very similar is happening with the marijuana initiative right here, right? Marijuana is another category of these ballot initiatives, and there's no battleground states for marijuana. Interestingly, you do have Florida with Amendment 3, which legalizes possession of up to 3 ounces of marijuana for those over the age of 21. Trump actually came out in favor for this, interestingly. Prior, it wasn't a kind of interesting flip because prior, I believe when he was in office, Trump said that he wouldn't support a national marijuana, national marijuana legalization. He wouldn't support it. But then recently he came out in favor of Amendment 3 in Florida, which legalizes marijuana. So it's kind of an interesting shift, I guess, in the conservative space towards legalization of marijuana. But that's irrelevant. But this is just a good example. Like marijuana would naturally, like a ballot initiative that legalizes marijuana would naturally just draw more young people to the ballot box, right? Because, I mean, if you just look at it, more young people use marijuana, and I'm sure they would want it to be legalized so they're not having to go under the bridge to meet like a drug dealer and have to deal with shady people. Rather, they can just order it, whatever, online or go to the store. So it would drive more young people to the ballot box just to vote for this amendment. Young people in general tend not to vote. So that's like a very prized demographic, right? So if you can get those people to the ballot box, that would be like very hot. And naturally, more young people tend to be progressive. So that would help like Democrats again. Now it is shifting again. You can say, well, young men are leaning more Republican, young women are leaning more Democrat. That's true. But if you still look at young people as a whole, even though if you look at it through time, maybe they're beginning to go more conservative versus Democrat, but that's still changing it from let's say it used to be 80% of young people were liberal. Now it's let's say 70% of young people are liberal, right? So it's it's moving towards the conservative, but it's still young people as a whole naturally are more liberal. So that's just giving you an idea of the ballot initiatives and how they can sway the vote. So the abortion one I think is the most sort of the most hot button issue that really has the potential to really kind of move the vote in one direction or the other. You do have a few also interesting ones like crime related and law and order related ballot initiatives. Arizona has 2. Arizona is really ballot initiative country over there. So they have Proposition 313, which requires life imprisonment for people convicted of child sex trafficking. You also have Proposition 314, which makes it a state crime for non-citizens to unlawfully enter the state, and it allows police to arrest non-citizens for doing so. It also allows state judges to order deportations, requires the immigration status of individuals to be determined before enrollment in financial aid or welfare programs, and so on and so forth. It basically is like an anti-illegal immigration bill. Will that drive more, Trump voters to the ballot box when initially they might have sat out the election? Maybe, maybe not. Just an interesting, ballot initiative there as well that could maybe, I mean, obviously, again, and one thing I'll also mention is like, these are caricatures. Like, so for instance, it's a caricature to say that a Trump voter is definitely against illegal immigration and a Harris voter is definitely pro-illegal immigration. That's just a caricature. There's many Democrats who align with Democrats on social issues, but they're against illegal immigration. So they might vote, yes on Proposition 314, but they might still vote for Harris, and vice versa for Trump, right? But you just look at the averages. Like, will this more likely move the needle for Trump or Harris? And same thing with the abortion thing, same thing with the marijuana thing. So that's just something to look out for, the ballot initiatives. One other thing, and this is something that our team is going to be doing a post-election analysis on, which is that while foreign actors can't really donate money, they can't donate money to national politics. Like you can't really have a foreign actor donating money to Trump or to Harris, right? There's laws against it, and there's also laws limiting the amount that anyone can donate to any specific candidate. And we did an episode on this. I don't know if our producer will put a link in the top right corner if you want to check out that episode. It was a really kind of a deep dive into it. But foreign actors are able to fund ballot initiatives and ballot referendums. And so that's something that we really want to kind of dive into after the election to see if we can trace the money. Because, I mean, let's say, just as this is a purely hypothetical example. Let's say you're a country like China, and you think that, maybe Trump is too hawkish and Harris would be better for China if Harris was in office in the United States. This is just a hypothetical. It could be the exact opposite. Whatever. I'm just painting a hypothetical example. As China, you have no qualms about meddling in American elections. Whatever. Of course, as a Chinese government official, you want to meddle in American elections to shape the makeup of their government to your liking. You could fund a ballot referendum in a battleground state that will drive more people in that party to come and vote for the candidate that you want. In this example, China, it's not unthinkable that Chinese coffers donate money through a bunch of different shell organizations to an American some kind of fund that's then funding a ballot initiative that's like getting out the vote, voting, knocking on people's doors, collecting signatures for some ballot initiative, getting enough signatures to finally make sure that, let's say, an abortion initiative is on the ballot in 2024 at the same time that you have this very close race, and the abortion ballot initiative will drive more Democrats to the ballot box. So we're going to be tracing that after the election. We're going to be doing kind of a post-election analysis, seeing if we can trace the money on these like very contentious ballot initiatives in the battleground states. We'll tell you if we find anything, but that's just sort of something really to look out for. Foreign funding of ballot initiatives, because ballot initiatives can really sway the national election, but nobody really talks about them. It's like sort of like political operatives know about it, but the average person really doesn't, and they don't really. It doesn't really make the news that much, but it definitely is something to look out for. I think we have. Oh, okay. By the way, so we're going to cover one more topic, but I sort of want to mention something really cool. So you're watching my live right now on the Facts Matter YouTube channel. Thank you very much. I hope you subscribe if you haven't already. Smash that like button so that this live and all of our other videos can reach ever more people via the YouTube algorithm. However, at 6, I'm actually going to get up and walk over. I'll walk with you. I'll take a cameraman with me. I'm going to walk over to the NTD studios, which are down the street in New York. And we're going to be doing a live over at NTD. It's I'm with the Epoch Times. The NTD is a sister media of the Epoch Times. And we're going to be doing a all-night election coverage broadcast. Like, we're going to be covering it up until probably like 3 or 4 a.m., basically up until they stop counting the votes and go home and sleep. That's when we'll sleep. So it's basically going to be like a total red eye for us, very like coffee-fueled night. But if you want to join us over there, I'm going to be presenting on this giant wall. They have great guests in there. Basically, I mean, if you want to like get into the excitement of election night, because I know some people just want to go to sleep and they wake up and they see, oh, okay, Harris won or Trump won, whatever. Like, they just want to go to sleep and wake up. If you are the type of person that wants to like, just hang out, have the TV running in the background or whatever, have YouTube running in the background, check out NCD. We'll be throwing the link. It'll be down there in the description box below. So basically at 6 o'clock, I'm literally going to walk over to their live stream. So if you're watching this live stream at 6 o'clock, click on that button and you can just join us right over there. That's where I'll be. That's where all the fun is going to be. So I hope you join us there. Again, 6 o'clock, we're going to be throwing the link down into the description box below. Do you think Trump and RFK removing fluoride from water will move the needle in terms of voters? Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So the question is, so basically the background to this question is that RFK Jr. recently came out and he said something to the effect that Trump will move to have fluoride removed from drinking water. And the question is, do you think that'll move the needle in terms of voters? I think like that particular issue, I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, actually, probably. I mean, maybe there was like one or two people who were like, not like, oh, I don't want to vote. I want to sit this one out. But their one issue is fluoride in water. And now they're like, all right, time to vote for Trump. It's like, so there might be that. Like, will it move the, I mean, in a very, very tight election, that might have an effect, like that one issue. Yes, I mean, in that sense, it might. Maybe also in the other direction, maybe people love fluoride in drinking water and they'll, vote for Harris for that purpose. But I think there's like a meta level to that, which is like, what do these sort of like new alignments within the Trump camp, what do they mean for his campaign? Because like, this fluoride is just like one issue that RFK Jr. has been pushing. And so I think the bigger question here is, how has RFK Jr.'s embrace of the Trump campaign affected the electorate? And I think, honestly, it's a lot bigger than the political pundits on TV care to admit. In my opinion, one reason is that, I mean, like it or not, like there's been a lot of ideological capture on mainstream media. And so I feel like if you're trying to get like honest analysis about things from the mainstream or the legacy news outlets, not to disparage anyone in particular, but like generally, when I'm watching them, at least, I always take everything they say with a grain of salt, because I know that like in a lot of their hearts, they really want one party to win over the other. And so if there's like a certain like strain of analysis that makes sense, but it might like, bolster, let's say, Trump's chances of winning or his perception of winning, they might like not talk about that. Versus me, I mean, you've been watching my channel long enough. I try to like not care who wins the election, and that is, I feel like, why my coverage can be a little bit more like nuanced. I'm still like branded by the mainstream media as like, like, oh, don't listen to that guy. He's too biased. But if you actually watch my program, I do try to like present it in a neutral way. But anyway, my point in saying that is like the pundits on television, they kind of like brushed aside, the RFK, vote won't really help Trump at all. But I suspect that it will, because I mean, RFK was polling well. I mean, I remember there was a period of time when he was polling like 20% or 25. I think 20% was maybe his highest during the Democrat primary. But even when you're looking at like prior to him dropping out in the national race, I mean, he was polling like, depending on the poll you looked at, like upwards of 10%. So, I mean, that is not insignificant, right? So when he shifted to Trump, of course, not his whole base won't just automatically move to Trump. A lot of them, they didn't like Trump, and that's why they liked RFK, and that's why there was that alignment. But when RFK moved to the Trump camp, you can imagine that I would bet like a sizable chunk of his voters moved with him. And especially in recent times, when there's been this float of an idea of like RFK actually getting put in charge of some of the health agencies in the country under a Trump administration, and him sort of being able to like change, like really affect some change in the industry, in the agencies. I feel like the people who were supporting RFK, and now they see that this is a potential, like under a Trump administration, RFK would have the power to do what he was essentially campaigning on doing. I can imagine like things like fluoride and things like that really moving the needle in that sense, because people are, looking at it and they're like, wow, I don't like Trump, but I like RFK, and I was voting for RFK for MAHA, make America healthy again for that reason. And if he's going to be actually put into a position to enact that policy, I might, bite my tongue, or what is the saying? What is it? Bite my tongue? Oh no, hold my breath. Yeah, maybe like I'll hold my breath and I'll push the button for Trump, like something like that. What's the saying? Hold my nose. Oh, I'll hold my nose, right? I'll hold my nose and I'll vote for Trump. So say that, and also like same thing with like Ron Paul. That's an interesting alignment, right? You have Elon Musk recently calling out Ron Paul and saying like, oh, you should be part of this government accountability project that we're going to be working on, right? Where it's like slashing waste in the government and all that. And Ron Paul says back on Twitter to Elon, like, I would be interested in something like that. So there's like this back and forth alignment. And so like Ron Paul voters, I wonder whether they would also, like just like you had RFK voters move towards the Trump camp for that reason, I wonder if you do have like this kind of strain of libertarian RFK voters still, this libertarian Ron Paul voter still out there from what it was at the 2008 campaign. And now they're looking at that like, wow, Ron Paul might actually be working with Elon Musk on a government accountability program. Let me hold my nose and vote for Trump as well. So it's kind of like, I'm really, really interested in this election because after tonight, well, I guess after a week from tonight, when we really see the election results, I really want to see what the election map looks like, what the new like camps look like, what the new electorate breakdown looks like. I'm really interested to see this new realignment we're going to have in the 2024 election because, yeah, you have all these different camps sort of coalescing. I mean, right now, the question was about RFK, so I've only been sort of discussing the Republican side. But, on the Democrat side, you also have sort of a realignment. So I would really be interested to see moving forward, like, what does the electorate look like moving forward? Like, yeah, what does it look like moving forward? Like, what are the different camps? How do the libertarians fit in to, let's say, a Trump administration? How do, like, these sort of independently minded RFK voters fit in? I'd love to see, like, the post-analysis on that. But so that was, like, a long-winded way of saying that I definitely think that RFK's involvement in the campaign will move the needle. That's just my takeaway from that. Is that true or not? We'll know after today. And so, yeah, we're about to move over to the other studio. I'm about to just grab my jacket and move on over. One thing I also just want to mention before we move over, though, is that today is election day, and obviously it's November, and we really did not have an October surprise. That's something I was kind of waiting for. I remember Hillary Clinton, I think 2 weeks ago, she made this statement. I forgot, she was getting interviewed on some channel, and Hillary Clinton said oh, this is going to be she alluded to knowing something. She's like, oh, just you wait for the October surprise. I'm like, oh, okay, it's going to be a big October surprise. But then October came and went, and there was no October surprise. I thought on Halloween, which is October 31st, I'm like, oh, something spicy is going to happen today, but nothing. So, I mean, no October surprise. Kind of interesting, I guess. I mean, The Atlantic had their hit piece on Trump, but that wasn't, that didn't move the needle at all. So anyway, just something interesting. No October surprise. Okay, so anyway, let's move on over to the other studio, and we'll be, let's walk. All right, so the moment we've all been waiting for is pretty much here, right? It's 6 p.m. The polls are just now starting to close, and election results will start to flow in. So this right here is an exciting giant board that NTD has given me where I'll be able to present information as it's going to be coming in throughout the evening. So this stream here on Facts Matter is about to end. We're about to cut the stream at exactly 6 p.m. And I'll be joining NTD for their pretty much all night long stream. We'll be going up until 3 or 4 a.m. or basically until they stop counting the votes. And so if you want to join us, just click on that link right there in the description box below. And I hope all of you will just come over to the NTD stream where, again, we'll be up probably until 4 a.m. counting the votes. So again, that link is right there in the description box below. See you there. That was good. Let's go. Let's go. Election night.
Election day is right around the corner. Have you voted yet?
This is your chance to speak, to enact the change you would like to see.
And that's why we're here, to keep you informed every step of the way.
So stick with NTD for the most detailed analysis on all of the issues that matter most to you.
And be sure to tune into our election night coverage. And don't forget to vote.
Welcome back to The Nation Decides.
This historical election,
Thank you for joining us.
you need the best political team.
Into the candidates meet expectations.
We bring the data-driven, unbiased reporting you won't find anywhere else.
So then focus on jobs and the economy.
We cut through the noise so you can make informed decisions.
Like to have heard more of.
Second debate that
Stay with NTD for the news that matters to you.
What do you think the Harris...
We are NTD.